On August the 30th, one of the most anticipated films of the decade finally comes to theaters, Reagan. It's going to be the sweeping life story of movie star, president, and American icon Ronald Reagan. We're very honored tonight to have with us 4 of the stars of the movie Reagan. To start our discussion, I want you to welcome the man who takes on the iconic title role of Ronald Reagan, one of Hollywood's most prolific and celebrated actors, Dennis Quaid, and Academy Award winner, the legendary Jon Voight. Welcome them. Good to see you, Jon.
Oh, there you go. No,
I don't know if we have room for you, Jon. We really are thrilled the dog is here. You know, I love dogs. I'm a dog person. I don't think the world would be...
I have no idea who this is.
You do, too.
Yeah, today's her birthday, though.
You've got to bring the dog on its
Peaches.
birthday. Peaches.
She actually plays the family dog. She's in Reagan. She's the only non-historical fact in the whole movie. They didn't have a bulldog.
Well, you know what? They should have. And they should have named it Peaches, and it would have been even better for the film. Well, I want to tell you both what an absolute honor it is to have you here.
Oh,
both of you. You've given us all so many incredible films over the years.
Well, tell you, the honor's ours. The honor really is ours, Mr. Huckabee. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, you've played, both of you have, but let me start with you, Dennis, because, I mean, I've seen you in roles from Jerry Lee Lewis all the way to Ronald Reagan. Now, that's a pretty big spectrum.
Reagan was challenging, and it was just so much involved. I got to work with this man here, Mr. Jon Voight, who is, gosh, he was my acting hero. Coming up.
You know how I got into this film? We went to, they said, Jon, come out, and I heard all about it, you know, the script and stuff. And I heard Dennis was going to do it. So they said, well, Dennis, you know, let's have just a little lunch. And, you know, let's talk about it. And I really didn't know if I was going to do it or not. It was very questionable to me at that time. And I went to the lunch and saw Dennis. And Dennis, you know, he's a peer. He's a young peer to me, but he's a peer. And I've admired his work, you know. And at the end of it, he said, Jon, I want you to do it. And that meant a lot to me. And I thought about it. I said, you know, that's a nice gesture for him to say that the way he said it. I should do this film. And that's why I did it. I did it because of your request, actually, at that time.
It's such a pivotal role he's got. It's a really interesting point of view, the way the story is told through the eyes of a KGB agent, who the KGB actually did keep files on Reagan going so far back into Hollywood and in his time as the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And a very interesting way to tell this story. And of the man who, along with Lech Walesa and the Pope, won the Cold War.
Yeah. And I think that's, you've played John Paul II. I mean, among the many roles you've played, Jon, is, you know, I think about everything from Midnight Cowboy and Deliverance all the way to Pope John Paul. That, too, is a stretch.
Don't forget Coming Home.
A pretty big stretch. But you play the character through which the story is told, the KGB agent, the composite. I mean, I think it's just a brilliant way to tell this story, because it's not the way you would expect for us to hear the story of Ronald Reagan through the thoughts of somebody on the other side. But someone without Reagan would still be the KGB and the Soviet Empire. I mean, Ronald Reagan did something that people thought couldn't be done. He brought down the Soviet Union. Dennis, one of the things that occurs to me, when Ronald Reagan was elected, so many people thought that he was a crazy cowboy and he would push the button.
A warmonger.
We were going to have world war. We had the most peaceful time in American history through my lifetime.
We were a nation in decline.
Yeah.
Very much like our times today, to tell you the truth. 78,
Very much.
79, 80. We were a nation in decline, so we were told. You know, there was just a lethargy going, a malaise, as Carter put it. We had hostages in Iran. Nobody talks about the hostages that we have over in the Middle East right now.
Yeah.
And gas prices, interest rates, 20%. It was very similar. And, you know, Reagan came along and said, we're not going that way, we're going this way. And he made us believe that there was a morning in America. And, you know, to me, he was the greatest president of the 20th century.
Absolutely amazing president. And one of the reasons he defied so many of the people around him, all of the establishment and the bureaucrats who told him, don't say this, don't do that, he did it because it was in his conscience to do it.
Yes. And that was the thing about him that I really learned that was a really good lesson for me, too, is that Reagan, you know, he was a Democrat right up until 64. He always said that, you know, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, it left me. But he, as far as governing, and the way he lived his life, he governed by principles. And if you do that, that goes beyond political party. And it also means, you know, that you make decisions that are unpopular even, but you know that they're the right ones because they adhere to those principles. And that is what will win out in the end. And he stuck to that all throughout his political career, whether a Democrat or a Republican. And that's what broke down the Soviet Union, I think, in the end.
Dennis, is it harder to play a figure that we all know? There's probably no one whose voice and image has been put on the American scene more than Ronald Reagan's. Does that make it harder to play someone that everybody knows?
Well, when I got offered the role, and a shiver of fear went up my spine. Because, you know, as I told you, he was my favorite president. I mean, I voted for him, and I went home, and my roommate, you know, said, who'd you vote for? I said, Ronald Reagan. He said, you are kicked out of the hippies. I turned in my card. But he was like Muhammad Ali, too. Everybody in the world knows what Reagan, what he sounds like. And I didn't want to do an impersonation, of course. And so I didn't say yes or no, because I wanted to acting I want to tell, when I play a real person, to tell the story from their point of view. And Reagan was a very private man, besides being the great communicator. They're hard to penetrate. But when I went up to the Reagan Ranch, which I got invited to while I was deliberating this, and it's not open to the public, and it was bought by his friends that we passed, and they left he and Nancy's clothes in the closet. You expect them to come back any minute. And it came through the gate, and I could just feel him. You could feel him in the pasture, and you could see the work that he had done there. I realized that Reagan was a very humble man. The house itself, the Western White House, is 1,100 square feet, maybe. They had a king-size bed, but it was 2 single beds that were zip-tied together. And, of course, they had GE appliances.
Yeah,
he used to be a spokesman for GE. But he was a simple man, really, and a great man.
We're very honored to welcome 2 more stars of the upcoming movie, Reagan. Internationally acclaimed model, actress, and author Jennifer O'Neill plays Reagan's mother, Nell, and the award-winning star of many great films, from Awakenings to The Artist, Penelope Ann Miller plays First Lady Nancy Reagan. Please give a warm welcome to Jennifer O'Neill and Penelope Ann Miller.
Hi, son.
Hello, Mom.
I haven't been around this many stars since I looked up at the sky on a bright night at the beach. This is fantastic. Penelope, Jennifer, thank you for also being here and sharing with us the incredible story of the movie Reagan. Okay, Penelope, you play Nancy Reagan. Complicated person in some ways because, you know, people knew that she was the most protective person for Ronald Reagan that ever lived. She made sure that he was taken care of. Yeah. How did you get into that role? Because you got to be a tough cookie to be Nancy Reagan.
Yes, well, it was very, very challenging and a daunting task. I had big shoes to fill or little ones, depending on, you know, shoe size. But yeah, it was, you know, as Dennis pointed out, when you're playing somebody so iconic that everybody knows that they've either met or they remember or they've seen videos and, you know, anything, you know, interviews, everyone's going to compare you to that person. And so I feel like I owe it to her legacy as a human being who lived in this world. I needed to honor that. And, you know, not that I had to play her, but it was more that when I played her, I needed to capture her essence. And like Dennis said, I didn't want to do an impersonation, so I did an enormous amount of research. But I was lucky I worked with the director prior. He knew me, liked me. I hadn't met Dennis, even though I've been around a long time. But Dennis, I guess, was asked how he felt about me, and I think he was a fan from Carlito's Way.
Yeah.
So that helped. And then
She just was Nancy. She really was. Would you see it? It's eerie. She just channels her. And, you know, I mean, even in the lunch line. And it was, it was
true method acting. Huh?
without being any kind of method. It's just so effortless. And it was incredible.
it was, well, look, playing opposite Dennis, who, I mean, really does capture Ronald Reagan so beautifully. I mean, phenomenal. And we right away, you came to the house and you actually jumped my fence. Do you remember that when you first met me? You couldn't get in the gate.
That's right.
You jumped my fence.
Yeah.
So.
It was either jump your fence or drive my car off a cliff, one or the other.
I think it is a good thing that was in California because she didn't have a gun. They wouldn't let her. Otherwise, had that been in Texas or Tennessee,
He would have been shot. Yeah. He would have been shot.
Yeah.
So we met and we hit it off really well because chemistry obviously is very important for Ronnie and Nancy because they were pretty much almost inseparable.
Yeah.
And she even says when he's assassinated, I should have been there. I always walk on your left side. I don't know. I want to cry because it's such a beautiful scene that we have after he wakes up from.
Their love story is just it's very core to the movie, and it's such a beautiful love story and so authentic.
He wrote her love notes almost every day.
And isn't that an important thing for America to see?
Yeah.
That there's a couple that embody a wonderful marriage and they love each other and they set an example. I think it's one of the great stories of the Reagan legacy.
They truly had a partnership that was beyond anything I've ever known. And she did. She had his back and she was fiercely protective and she loved him. Like they were in love. And you don't see that a lot. I mean, so that, you know, that partnership, I mean, even Ron Jr. said it at the memorial, my dad would not have been president if it wasn't for Nancy, but it was because she believed in him, because she was the woman behind the man in a good way. And sometimes that's not perceived as good. It's perceived as manipulative or conniving, or a man stands behind a man and, you know, he's a strategist, but a woman stands behind a man.
But it was a very important part of the story. I think it's
she was accused of that. Nancy was all about being, you know, almost the puppet master sometimes.
Yeah. But that's not a fair assessment.
There would not have been a President Ronald Reagan without Nancy.
Yeah.
And it was because of the strength of them as a couple, as a marriage with God in their relationship as well, that really carried the day for them. That was what they drew off of. They were constant companions.
She believed in his greatness.
Yeah.
She really believed in him. And so she helped him believe in himself. It was her belief in him and her saying, you can do great things, that gave him the confidence to do what he did. And I think that's beautiful and it's noble.
And Jennifer, I want to talk about the fact that you play Nell, the mother.
Yes.
An important part of this film is weaving in that so much of the values that he ended up embodying for America, those came from his mother. They came from his childhood.
I was the first lady in his life.
I was
You set a good example. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. She was an amazing lady. And in looking at her life and her influence on Ronnie, she would call him, being virtually a single mom because the father had a lot of drinking issues and so forth. She was she was such a strong believer. She was a disciple, she called herself, of Jesus Christ. She was in a lot of plays, so she put the acting bug, I think, in his basket there. And they were very close. And she really instilled a lot of his character and his morals and his ethics that you saw throughout his entire life. So and then you came along, Nancy came along, and that was a beautiful entree. So he had two very strong women in his life.
I think it's important, though, that the whole story of Ronald Reagan is being told. If it had only been his presidency, it would have been a great movie, but it really wouldn't have explained who he is. Yeah. And I think the brilliance of the film is that we see him, the values he grew up with, the woman who protected him and stood by him no matter what.
You know, one of the things about Reagan is going along and really kind of delving into him and kind of, you know, what would it be like for me if I was in his shoes, you know? Is that I don't think he ever got to that point at being an actor that he wanted where he wanted to go. Yeah. You know, that role was kind of taken by John Wayne, and I think the studios, they kind of, Jack Warner kind of kept him in doing B movies. And then he was married to Jane Wyman for a time, who won an Academy Award as his career was kind of sliding down.
It's a little bit of a Stars Born thing going on there.
Yeah. And that kind of led him to be the vice president and then the president of the Screen Actors Guild at the time. That's a job that no actor aspires to, by the way. But it was, you know, it's funny how you know, God's purpose comes into one's life. You ask God, you know, for something, you better be careful. He might give it to you, only in a way that you said, no, not that way. That was really God's purpose of getting him into politics, and that was his entry.
Well, it's a remarkable film. The movie opens nationwide on the weekend of August the 30th. If you go to Huckabee.tv, you will find a link to a lot more information and the clips. I don't know how busy you are, but since you're clearly slacking off watching YouTube videos, you've probably got the time to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell and the like button. That way you get updates on new videos.